Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We're happy to be with you once again. This week, we sent out all of the information in our newsletter about our high holidays. We've got lots of wonderful things coming up, including several live opportunities on Zoom. Those are for members only, classes, as well as a memorial service on the afternoon of Yom Kippur. But for everyone who's watching, you have the opportunity to join us, as you have been, on YouTube, this time with a lot more faces, as we'll be welcoming members of our community to do readings, and we'll be hearing from our choir. Our sound engineer has been going around to our music director, Ezra Donner, and the wonderful members of our choir whom we hear each year in person. And we also have some other treats. We will be giving away to our members gift boxes for the holidays. We'll also, ahead of the holidays, be offering a flu inoculation clinic. So please look for that, and our gift boxes will be available that day as well, too. It'll be a few days before the onset of the new year. We are now in the month of Elul. Friday today and last night we inaugurated. It is the month of self-reflection, and we will be doing some of that tonight with our guest, Ron Aronson. But first, let's begin with Hine Matov.
הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, 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 יאללה לי לה 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 לי. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, יאללה לי לה 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 לי. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, הנה מה טוב ומנעים, הנה מה טוב ומנעים, יאללה לי לה 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 לי. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
And now I'll ask Arthur to please light our Shabbat candles as we recite our humanistic blessing. Baruch ha'or ba'olam, Baruch ha'or ba'adam, Baruch ha'or ba'shalom, ba'shalom, Baruch ha'or, Baruch ha'or, b'Shabbat. And I join you all in raising up our cup of joy, l'chaim. This week we met as a board. Our board of trustees and executive board met on Tuesday night, as they do throughout the year. This was the first meeting of our new board. Normally we would do an installation for them on a Friday night, invite them up to light candles. Not this time, however. We did it on Zoom. I want to thank all of the people who have agreed to serve this year, only some of whom could be with us last Tuesday, because August, of course, is always the month when we just are getting revved up and people are on vacation. And we also had a couple of internet problems, but allow me to just recognize all of them, those who were there and those who weren't. They are Dorit Bengal, Sarah Brooks, Suzanne Bustiker, Greg Campo, Laura Castleman, Susie Friedman, Melanie Goldberg, Alex Lumelski, George Molnar, Kathy Radner, Fran Shore, David Weeks, and immediate past president Steve Blum. I should mention that Kathy Radner is actually our secretary. She came on in a replacement role last year, and she is joined on the executive board by Paul Caradona, the president, Elaine Fieldman, our vice president, and our wonderful treasurer, Ned Greenberg. Let me play you a little bit of the swearing-in ceremony that we did on Tuesday.
I'm going to start with a story that I always share whenever we have these installations. It's from the Talmud. It's about a rabbi named Rav Asi. Rav Asi was on his deathbed, and he began to cry. And his nephew came in, and Rav Asi, being such a great and important person, he said to him, "Why are you crying? Why are you weeping, uncle? You've done everything. You've taught every good deed. You have countless disciples. They're arrayed around you now. Could there be anything? And most importantly, you always stayed out of communal affairs." And that's when Rav Asi, even on his deathbed, nodded and he said, "That was my great error. I could have led, and I did not." The fact that you choose to lead says a lot about you. This is not an easy thing to do. It's especially hard during this period, but it's extraordinarily time consuming. And to do it right takes a lot of time, a lot of commitment. Having worked with many of the committees, and I think we can all look to the membership committee last year as a great example of this, this can almost mean taking on a part-time job. It's no small consideration. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank those who are departing as well, although most of our members stayed on. You have this profound responsibility, and those watching at home, we just met with Suzanne Paul, which is why she's on our screen, who spoke about it. I have known our board members to be always mutually respectful. It doesn't mean there aren't tussles from time to time, but when people care deeply about something, that's what they do. But I found it to always be done with mutual respect and the esteem that you feel for each other and the bond that you feel over this interesting and I think important enterprise for the Jewish and humanistic futures that we call humanistic Judaism. So I'm going to, because of the limitations of Zoom, I'm going to read the version of the pledge that we did, and then I'll ask you to reply with the words I give you. So here it goes. Do you pledge to discharge your responsibilities with care, to conduct the business of our community in an ethical manner, to listen to the voices of others in our community, to deliberate in a manner that honors our humanistic standards and that reflects positively on humanistic Judaism? If so, I ask that you respond together saying, "I do so pledge."
I do so pledge.
Each of you has accepted this challenge of leadership. Mazel tov, thank you for your willingness to lead. These are indeed unprecedented times. I know that you'll find the strength to deal with it. Every challenge, remember, also brings opportunities. We're seeing that as well now. We, of course, as a congregation, occupy a very important place in both the history of secular humanism and in Judaism. And we, as the founding congregation, lead the others. Thank you for your willingness to do that, and mazel tov to everybody.
Present also on that Zoom meeting were our wonderful and my partner in crime, Executive Director Anne-Marie Fisher, and Suzanne Paul, who gave an orientation to our members. She was, I think, in the upper left square, and we thank her as well. We continue with a reading composed by members of Or Hadash, a Reconstructionist congregation, recently during the pandemic. What do I desire for my country? How do I vision the land I love? Let it be a land where knowledge is free. May all people live together as brothers and sisters, a land where we emerge from this with more caring, a greater appreciation for each other, a land where no one is forced to go to bed hungry or live on the streets, a land where everyone loves themselves well enough to love their fellow human being as themselves, as we are commanded. a land with a wise, humane leader to serve as a role model for the country, a land where our leaders speak the truth, a land where our leaders truly work for the greater good, a land of compassion where we all work and play together, where poles of separation become poles of mutual support and understanding, where reason wins out over blind faith, where we recover our historic genius for voluntary community commitment, where our vision is restored to embrace humanity, inclusiveness, and empathy, a land where the light within each of us can begin to illuminate the world, where as we care for each other, we don't forget to care for our fragile earth, where there is equitable medical care for all, a land where we have economic security and justice for all, a land where kids are free to be happy and thrive and grow, a land that once again welcomes the huddled masses yearning to be free. Empathy, where we all have the support and love of community, a land where we work together for the good of all, a land where knowledge and expertise are more valued in all ways so that people are motivated to become epidemiologists and teachers rather than reality TV stars or influencers, where the mind is led forward into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom. Let my country awake. All of this depends on us looking to each other and looking within. And that's the theme, of course, of our movement song. We continue with Afo Ori. Tonight, I am very proud to present a conversation that I had this week with my mentor, my friend, Dr. Ron Aronson, who is Distinguished Professor Emeritus of the History of Ideas at Wayne State University. Normally, when I introduce Ron, the introduction is very long because he is the author of so many popular and academic pieces for journals and appeared on television. He's produced documentaries and television debates. He is indeed one of the great activists of our time and a great humanistic activist. In fact, he's a world-renowned humanistic scholar. He's written a number of books, being an expert also on Jean-Paul Sartre, but I want to particularly point out to all of you a book called Living Without God, New Directions for Atheists, Agnostics, Secularists, and the Undecided, and his most recent work, which I will be looking at a little bit on Yom Kippur, called We, Reviving Social Hope. Highly recommended. Our conversation tonight was inspired by a recent piece he published in Tikkun magazine. A link to that and to other relevant pieces are below the video. It was called All in It Together, From the Pandemic to the Uprising Against Racism. Let's take a look at our conversation.
Ron Aronson, thank you for joining us tonight. Shabbat Shalom. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about this was because of the ways that you've addressed what's been going on in this pandemic, both from the political uprisings that have taken place from that perspective, and also you wrote in Tikkun magazine in a wonderful piece that I want to recommend to everybody called All in It Together, From the Pandemic to the Uprising Against Racism. you wrote about and in a sense asked the very question that I'm going to begin with, which is, what's the connection between this anti-racist wave that we're experiencing, the rise in social justice awareness, and the sheltering in place and everything else that has come out of this pandemic so far?
Well, from the very beginning, what I found striking living in the pandemic like everyone else and walking around my neighborhood is that there was a feeling of people being very gracious and genial and friendly towards each other as we were avoiding each other. And as you would cross the street, people would say thank you. And also people would say hello. There was a strange feeling of community. I say strange because it was based on avoiding each other and protecting each other from ourselves and thanking other people for doing the same. At the same time, signs started popping up in the neighborhood, thanking Beaumont Hospital, thanking essential workers, and people were kind of aware of grocery workers, food delivery people, police, fire, the basic structure of services in a society. People were aware that we were depending on people for our survival, for our food, and for our protection. The doctors and nurses, and there was a deep feeling emerging of connectedness with all the areas and people we depend on in order to live a daily life and feel protected. So we had these two dimensions of a kind of epidemiological all in it together, because we've got to fight the curve and flatten the curve together by distancing. Around Huntington Woods, signs started popping up done by the city. If you're social distancing, be sure you stay 6 feet away. This is for people walking the streets. So there was a sense of the public awareness, official awareness, and people spontaneously being aware of each other, being in it together, and of our real dependency on a whole wide range of people. Now, as that was happening, figures started coming out about the percentage of Black people in Michigan who were affected by and then dying from COVID-19. And it was about 3 times as many Black people as white people. So stark awareness we were having that, yes, we were all in it together in some way. We were always in it together, but we were conscious of it in a way we never before, of our depending on people for our survival, particularly those of us sheltering at home. And we were at the same time aware of some people having a harder time of it than we were, and some people dying at a much greater rate. And so we were in it together, but we weren't in it together at the same time. There was a real, it's a word that really has come into Americans' consciousness, I think, since the Occupy movement and since Bernie Sanders' candidacy, of inequality, stark inequality, and particularly because people who had to go to work tended to be darker. They tended to be Blacker or Hispanic, and they were getting infected and dying at a much greater rate. So we were all in it together, yes, absolutely. And yet there was something really grotesquely unfair about it. So I think all of us, I want to say, whether we openly faced it or whether we repressed it, were living a contradiction. And that was the contradiction of the pandemic. All in it together, yes, and the signs are everywhere. There are all in it together websites, and all in it together Twitter feeds, and all in it together on gas stations. When you're ordering from a restaurant, sometimes there'll be an all in it together little logo somewhere, or Grubhub will probably have it at their website. So there's that all in it together, and this feeling that no, this is really, really, really unfair. The most striking statistic for me, there are a lot of articles, a lot of experiences. Most striking was that a significant percentage of the population of Manhattan, New York City, over 400,000 weren't there. People who live in New York, my sister reported a kind of emptiness because people were, at their weekend homes in Woodstock or the Hamptons or even Palm Beach. People had left to escape the pandemic in the city. People who could afford to.
And then on top of all this, George Floyd and that video and all of the awareness that we could not get around Black Lives Matter when those of us who were working on this 4, 5, 6 years ago started, all of a sudden it exploded. And how did that play in? And how will it play out?
Right, it's obviously still playing out, and it's with us for a long time to come, because there is a demand for equality that's sharper and clearer than anyone has ever seen before. The amazing thing about the George Floyd demonstrations, for me, a white person who this evening regularly will stand on the corner of Woodward and 11 Mile Road with a Black Lives Matter sign, along with another 20 or 30 people. The amazing thing is, as people drive by in their cars, and this is very different for people who have been peace movement people and are used to standing on Woodward and 9 Mile in Ferndale, or anywhere where they have been protesting against wars, and you're used to standing with a sign, and occasionally someone honks as they go by. It's marvelous. But at Woodward and 11, at the St. John's Church, the honks are not just 3 times as many or 10 times as many. It seems like there are 30 times as many. There is a responsiveness among white people. Go back to the demonstrations. The demonstrations were not Black people with a few supportive whites, experience of many at the time of the Civil Rights Movement, but massive support of white people. Some are the usual suspects of older white folks who've been around movements like this forever, but so many young white people demonstrating. For these young white people, Black people are sort of a normal part of their lives. And the denial about Black inequality has sort of been ripped away, and people are confronting that white and Black together in a way that was really, I think, only at certain moments during the Civil Rights Movement of the 60s happened, but is really the condition of what's happening today. That's true all over the country, small towns, suburbs, I mean, all around here. The number of suburban demonstrations is really striking. So one of the things that's happening is a very unified, I want to say generational awareness of Black-white inequality. And it's not simply about Black people being subjected to white police forces. It's something much deeper about the whole society. And there's an awareness and a willingness to admit a breaking down of the denial that, yes, this is still a profoundly unequal society. And what did that have to do with the pandemic and sheltering at home? Number one, we've been depending on darker people, Black people, brown people. We've been depending on them. White people have. And how can you depend on these people and yet hide from your awareness about how they're living and how they're treated? That just got, I think, ripped open. But there's, in the dependency, one has to say, there has been, there's the Beaumont worker signs and the other signs in neighborhoods. There's a gratitude, the gratitude of people serenading from their balconies, not only in Italy, but in New York City and in other cities, people serenading and thanking the essential workers, a feeling like we want to thank you for keeping us alive.
Now,
But once you,
well, I was going to mention there's an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, that many of the folks in these essential roles, people who have essentially been in minimum wage jobs and got a little bit of extra pay at the beginning, are now beginning to feel once again ignored. And once again, at the mercy of the health system, worried that they're not going to be able to get treatment should they be sick or sick pay. Is this something that you see as part of the larger social justice movement that we will be addressing collectively, that we can address collectively finally?
we have to address it collectively. And the reason we have to is not just a moral reason. It's also something has happened in our consciousness, I think. The awareness that these people we depend on, for whom we feel gratitude, are also living grossly unequal lives, and something must be done about that. And there is a feeling of sociality, of connectedness that I think the pandemic has produced. I wrote an article about the difference between our experience and the experience in Camus' The Plague, as he describes the experience of the pandemic. And we have a feeling throughout the society, which he does not talk about, of interconnectedness as a result of our plague. We have a feeling of belonging together, and the all in it together. Some people said, "Oh, this is nonsense. It's just bull. We're not really in it together." Well, I'm saying yes and no. And the yes part of being in it together is an awareness of interconnectedness. And when you have an awareness of interconnectedness, how can you put up with, how can you tolerate the inferior, unequal conditions that a fellow human being you depend on for your survival is subjected to?
And yet, 30% of our nation not only doesn't seem to be interconnected with those who are suffering in this way, or from the social justice and other economic inequality, but they don't even really seem to be treating this pandemic. Well, I'll just give you a little joke I saw, that Americans need to stop saying avoid something like the plague, because clearly there's too many of us who don't. And what is up with that?
Well, what is up with that is we're dealing with, you say 30%.
Maybe
it should only be so. I'll buy 30%, because the Trump support is at 41%. We're dealing with the same percentage, roughly, give or take, who has rejected evolution, who probably do not accept global, who supported Trump from the beginning, who have opposed all the major social justice oriented shifts and changes of American society for the last 50 years. There is a core, unlike any other country, not to say, a core of Americans, and this goes, I would argue, all the way back to slavery, all the way back to Jim Crow, all the way back to then the rise of evangelical Christianity as a major force in the Republican Party in the 70s and 80s. We're dealing with a huge percentage of Americans who, I suppose, reject all the changes towards women, towards minorities, towards gays and lesbians, all the changes of that are significant social changes of the past 50 years. There is a core kept alive. I think it's kept alive by evangelical Christianity as one of its institutional fulcrums. And they're Trump's base. That's Trump's base. And they are capable of denial. They're capable of not just skepticism, but of conspiracy theories, of refusing to believe that anything like global warming should be taken seriously. We're dealing with a very profoundly irrational, negative, and hateful part of the society. And I think we have to face that. At the beginning, they were on board. At the beginning, they were on board with, they weren't wearing masks because nobody was earlier, but they were sheltering at home. They did accept it. But interestingly enough, some 36% of them from the very beginning of Americans felt that the shutdown was too serious. They weren't happy with the shutdown. They didn't accept it. And they were encouraged by Trump. Don't forget, these are not people necessarily thinking for themselves, but they're being encouraged by Trump. Trump says, liberate Michigan, which is, if you think about it, encouraging resistance to the national program, right, by the president.
Well, the same program
that's
the White House was promoting was being undercut by the same White House.
It's incredible, right? It's incredible, right? But that's we have to deal coming out of this. Let's say, if Biden is elected, and if a fairly progressive Senate and House of Representatives are elected, fairly progressive Senate, it would just be getting rid of Mitch McConnell and having a Democratic majority. But if there are significant changes and we begin to move to the kind of rebuilding after Trump, that's going to take years and years and years, these people will be in opposition, and they're a formidable force. Right now, they are trying to keep control of the country despite being a minority. And Trump, it's not just simply Trump, it's Trump and his base, and moving to minority rule because they no longer can hope for majority rule. But this is a part of the society that has been tolerated for years and years. And I want to say, speaking to fellow humanistic Jews, that the issue of evangelical religion and their intolerance towards everything we value has been a crucial part of this, and it's been going on since the moral majority and before. And it's part of the cross we've had to bear. And they, right, and they are at the core. Trump said to those folks at one point in 2016, he said, "This is our last chance," meaning this is our last chance to hold on to power, white Christian America, before the country becomes majority minority. And we're part of that minority.
So this is probably a good place to stop just for time. I do want to point out that as a 501c3, we are not endorsing or in any way promoting any candidacy, but we do suggest that people vote in alignment with their values, as every organization is allowed to say. And that I want to point out that there are people on the other side of the aisle. Many of them are not currently in the corridors of power, but you and I talked about them in the conversation we had earlier, and I've written about them in my commentary in the newsletter. The people who have led the Republican Party in other ways, and will I think rise to leadership and be people who support science and support a sane and evidence-based response to our problems of this country. So I just want to put that in there as the disclaimer, because we do support the Johnson Amendment. We want to be good on that as well too. Ron, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to share the little bit of conversations that you and I have privately with everyone in the conversation. I'm always appreciative to you for that, and thank you. Thanks a million for joining our little YouTube get together tonight.
We'll continue with a very empowering a version of a traditional song that we sing every week, Na'aseh Shalom, Let Us Make Peace.
Thou, Lord,
this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, we extend our well wishes to these members of our community and their loved ones. To Bernice Bunny Lasker, Cece Stone, Karen Tremper Harris, Robert Liebhaber, Larry Fisher, Jennifer Breen, Anne Marie Kurzniak, Greg Lowenthal, and Myron Tink. May all who suffer know that they are not alone. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a complete recovery, refuah shlema, the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season and years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our community continues to mourn the recent death of Patty Becker, a beloved, dear, and honored member of our community, as we extend our condolences to her entire family, and to Alan Becker, who I know is watching right now. We observe also the art sites of Rosa Fostovsky, Jacob Pincus, Max Litke, Jane Kaplan, Lawrence Levine, Florence Krieger, Gabriel Lasker, Jacqueline Gibbs, and Rose Weinstein. Yehi zichram livracha. May their memories bring a sense of comfort as we go through our lives in their absence. Well, that's it for tonight, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you have a relaxing and and wonderful Shabbat. We will see you next week. We'll be taking a week off, don't forget, for Labor Day weekend. And then we'll return with one more service and lots of good holiday stuff. Check it out online, birminghamtemple.org or .com. And our newsletter is always there for the latest and greatest information. We'll conclude now with May we know peace as we go on our way.
We know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be possessed of health and joy. May this be our future. Shalom. 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 May this be our future. Shalom. 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 May this be we feel sheltered by the wings of peace. May we abide in safety and in love. May praise and compassion find their way to everyone. May this be our future. Shalom. Shalom, shalom. May this be our future. Shalom. Shalom, shalom. May this be our future. Shalom.